Okay, we are live.
Okay, thank you. It is now 2:01 p.m. and we will call the Rules Committee meeting to order. For the record, we do have all members present. If I could have a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting, please.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
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 Okay, very good. We have one item today, and I'm going to ask Ms. Biviano if well, I'll go ahead and read this in here. This one item we have is a resolution expressing sympathy and condolences to the family and friends of Jalen Walker, supporting the rights of citizens to assemble and engage in peaceful demonstrations, urging the community to seek peace and to engage in respectful dialogue, urging the city to designate and observe Wednesday, July 13th, 2022, a citywide day of mourning in the city of Akron, condemning acts of violence and destruction and declaring an emergency. And I will defer to President Somerville.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I'm hoping that we can get support as council as a whole on this piece. The resolution, first, again, we want to send our condolences to Jalen Walker's family. And we also want to recognize that since the tragic death of Jalen, we have also lost 3 other Akron residents to gun violence. And so we want to acknowledge the loss of life, but also talk about the fact that with every life lost, grief is compounded, and we've not even had a moment to really process Jalen's passing, let alone the other recent deaths that have happened in the community. So it is our hopes that on Wednesday, we can take a moment to pause and begin to process through grief and really what is happening here in our city.
Thank you, President Somerville. Would certainly open first to any committee members for any comments. For any hands here?
I can't seem to get this thing to work, Mr. Chair.
I see Mr. Malik in the meantime. Mr. Malik?
I'll defer to Councilwoman Amobian, it appears.
Okay, very good. Councilwoman Amobian.
Well, thank you, Mr. Malik, as well. I certainly concur with the thoughts of the president. I just want to make sure that we acknowledge that, violence is never accepted in any form, from my perspective. And I'm sure everybody would agree. Jalen's death is totally treated differently than, I don't know, all the other individuals who passed, and it's unfortunate, especially the 4-year-old child. But I want us to make sure that we recognize that along with the death of Jalen, that there will be an opportunity, hopefully in our near future, that we will be reviewing some of the policies and things that go along with policing our citizens. This has been extremely tragic and very difficult for this community over the last week or so. And we know that people are engaging in protests as long as it's peaceful. I don't think we have a problem with that. But we do not encourage or endorse any violence at all. And we know that Wednesday will be a long day for all of us. So we ask that we all stay vigilant and prayerful and continue to keep our city in mind, that this has been a really difficult time, extremely difficult. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman Amobian. I'll come to Mr. Malik now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with my colleague, Ms. Amobian, and with President Somerville, and certainly support this resolution. I'll defer most of what I have to say to this evening, but I did just want to briefly say, I think we are all heartbroken at the killing that we saw and the brutal video that we saw. There'll be an independent investigation the decisions about criminal liability will be for a grand jury, but I hope that we can all agree that what happened on a moral level is not acceptable, particularly the number of shots that were fired, the handcuffing of the body afterwards, and how all of it unfolded. And I hope that this situation creates a sense of urgency for needed change. We have talked about this for many years. Folks have talked about this in chambers for many years before any of us sat there. But we need a systemic change in culture and policy and how we do policing in Akron. And I very much hope that that is something that we pursue in the weeks and months to come as we reckon with this killing.
Thank you, Sarah. I do not see any other hands. Please help me here.
I don't see any at the moment, Mr. Chair.
Okay, very good. Can I receive a motion for favorable report?
Motion for a favorable report. The suspension of the rules.
Second.
I have a second. All in favor, please let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, we'll see that this item comes before us this evening. And,
Mr. Chair, could I do a roll call on that? I had a hard time.
Oh, I'm
hearing
sorry.
everyone.
Apologize. I'm sorry, Sarah.
Sure. Freeman,
Aye.
Fusco,
Aye.
Homobian,
Aye.
Connor. Aye. Malik.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passed 5-0.
Okay, thank you
Mr.
for that.
Chair, I was trying my best to get in, but I didn't realize I was muted. And I guess we can do it tonight to make this president, I'm not sure who's all on the legislation, but to make it council and mayor as a whole. I think we all agree with this.
Sure, we'll see that that comes forward this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, if there's nothing else to come before us, we are adjourned at 2:08. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next committee of the day is the Public Service Committee. Those committee members are Mosley, Kamer, Holland, Lombardo, and McKittrick. Looks like we do have all members present except for Councilwoman Mosley. I believe Councilman Kamer will be chairing today. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Sarah. I'd like to call the public service meeting to order, please. Can I get approval of the last meeting minutes, please?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. Sarah, I will ask you, because I went ahead and just printed out the bottom part of the agenda, because I thought maybe Councilwoman Mosley would be here. So I start with 10. So are you able to read in the first couple pieces for me and we can go from there?
Of course, yep.
All right, thank you.
Item number 6 is an ordinance levying special assessments for the improvement of 4th Street between the termini of Maryland Avenue and Kenmore Boulevard by paving, grading, constructing and reconstructing curbs, concrete sidewalks and driveway approaches, installing roof drain pipes and planting trees and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Sarah. And I see we have our Service Director, Chris Luttle, with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of committee. This legislation is for the full improvement of 4th Street by Fire Station number 10. It's about 1,100 feet of full improvement. We removed the concrete pavement, replaced it with asphalt, new curbs, new sidewalks, new street lawns. Now that the project has been out of warranty, not out of warranty, but the 1 year has been passed, it's time to assess the affected property owners. With that, sir, I would ask if we could suspend the rules on this assessment piece because of the timing with Summit County tax bills.
All right, thank you, Mr. Luttle. Let me see if we have any questions or comments from committee members. I do not see any other council members that are online with us. All right, Chris Luttle would like suspension of the rules. Can I get suspension of the rules, please?
So moved.
Second.
All right, I have a motion, a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. Sarah, can you read in number 7, please?
Sure. Item number 7 is an ordinance declaring the necessity of determining to proceed with and levying special assessments for the improvement of property located at 153 to 165 South Main Street, parcel number 6755901, by reconstructing and repairing a vault, all in accordance with a petition submitted by the property owner and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Sarah. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was in phase 1 of Main Street reconstruction. Some of the property owners took it upon themselves to replace their vaults before we reconstructed the sidewalk above it. Some of the property owners took advantage of our offer and let us put it into the project, and then they were assessed 100% of the cost. So this property owner, it was around $215,000. They will be assessed over 10 years or 20 payments, 2 payments per year for 10 years. This is the law building, which is basically just to the west of our building here at Muni. They turned it over to residential. I think it's been a very successful project. I think he's fairly full with the residential end. I think he's still trying to rent some of the commercial or retail space. With the same explanation of the last piece, sir, with the assessments and the timing of Summit County, I will take any questions, but I would like to suspend the rules if possible.
All right, thank you, Chris. Let me see if we have any questions or comments from committee members. Looking, and I do not see any hands raised. Any other council members that are online with us? Okay, committee, can we make a recommendation?
I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. Moving on to number 8, Sarah, please.
Item number 8 is an ordinance authorizing the purchasing agent to enter into an agreement or agreements for the purchase of the construction of the airport FBO hangar roof replacement project and declaring an emergency.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Chris Lettle, back to you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Out at the FBO, or our flight-based operation building out at Fulton, the roof is in need of replace. We did have it in the operating budget. We're looking at a system. It's a standing seam roof currently. We're looking at filling in those seams with a high-density foam and then putting a PVC cover over the roof. So we use this basically the same application on our street cleaning roof, which is the Duralast roofing system. It's been holding up very good. We're very comfortable with the 20-year warranty. With that, consent is fine on this, but I will answer any questions. It's about a 23,000 square foot building that we're doing here.
All right, thank you, Chris. Let me look to see if we have any questions or comments from committee members first. I do not see any hands raised. Any other council members online with us? All right, moving forward, I'll make the motion for consent agenda. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. Sarah, one more, and then I think I have the rest of the copies, please.
Item number 9 is an ordinance declaring the necessity of determining to proceed with and levying special assessments for the improvement of certain streets in the city by constructing, reconstructing, and repairing concrete sidewalks, driveway approaches, curbs, retaining walls, and installing roof drain pipes, all in accordance with petitions submitted by property owners under the 2020 citywide sidewalk program and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Sarah. Chris Lettle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of committee. This is the 2020 sidewalk program. We did have a little bit of carryover. That's why we're bringing this in now. Everything's been completed from 2020. It's our standard sidewalk program. It's the standard assessments, sir, with the same explanation and reason with Summit County tax records. If possibly, we could suspend the rules, please.
All right, thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Let me see if we have any questions or comments from committee members. I do not see any. Any other council members online? I do not see any. Can I get a motion for suspension of the rules, please?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. Next item, ordinance number 10, ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into a contract or contracts after publicly advertising for bids for the construction of Riverside Sewer Separation RAC 34 project and declare an emergency. Chris Lettle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of committee. This is part of our North Side Interceptor Tunnel project. We've been going back and forth for well over a year with the EPA on constructing a smaller tunnel, in essence, to save $40 million or $38 million. Part of our proposal is to take this section of what we call RAC 34 and separate it. So what it will be conceivably, sir, is about, it consists of Big Falls, Murray, Mount Vernon, Lexington, Linden, Clifton, Magnolia, and Riverside Drives in North Hill. It's about the 1,100 blocks. So these streets are basically between Cauga Falls Avenue and Riverside Drive to the north. And like I said, about halfway up between those streets is the 1,100 block. We are going to remove the combination sewer. And by doing that, we are going to add new storm sewers in these streets, new storm inlets, and then we will take this overflow and it will be eliminated from the tunnel or the north side interceptor. So we remove all this overflow, and it's just stormwater from the system. And by doing that, it will let us achieve to build that smaller tunnel. So it is about a $10 million project. But with that being said, if we put all this flow into the tunnel, we would have had to build this huge drop shaft at the end of Clifton Avenue on Riverside Drive. And to put that in perspective, if you look down at Glendale, at the bottom of Glendale, right off of 59, we have that huge concrete structure. I'm sure Councilwoman Holland's been down there and looked at it where we put the new parking lot. We would have had to take at least one house to do that. So by doing this separation, there will be no houses that will have to be taken. There will be a lot less disruption to the neighborhood. Yes, they're going to have some disruption while we put the storm sewer on their street. But when it's all said and done, this is just not eliminating the overflow in those high storms. This is eliminating that overflow in any storm. And this is forever. As you know, we're mandated to eliminate overflow in the typical year. Well, this is going to overflow in any storm. There will be no overflow. Even if it's a 100-year storm, that is not going to precipitate into an overflow in this RAC district. So the EPA, they have really endorsed this project. We've got some good engineering on this project. So consent is fine, but I will take any questions from any of you if you need further explanation.
All right, thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Let me see if we have any committee members. We do have Councilman Lombardo. His hand is raised. Please, Councilman.
Thank you. Mr. Lettle, I just wanted to know, maybe I missed it. The project term is 1 year, 2 years, 3 years?
Well, we hope to bid this later this year, sir. And we are really thinking the project is about a 12-month, 12 to 14 month. But obviously, when we do one street, it shouldn't affect the other street. They're all different segments. But you know, we are mandated to have this tunnel because this is part of that project. We're mandated to have this tunnel done by the end of 26. Okay. Well, this portion of the project, we're really feel like it will be done by the end of 24 or before. So we're going to eliminate overflow probably 2 years ahead. Now it's a small portion of the overflow. You have 4 racks, and rack 35 down by Front Street is the biggest portion. But we're going to take a portion of this and eliminate that overflow 2 years ahead of what our mandated schedule is. So yes, and what'll happen is they will do a trench to put these storm sewers in. But we, in this project, in that 1100 block north, we will grind and resurface those roads. So when it's done, it's going to look like a brand new road. We're not going to do. There may be some curb that be replaced because they're new and less, but we're not doing new curb. We're not doing new sidewalk. We're just replacing the affected portion of this project.
Okay, so That's what I was going to ask as far as resurfacing goes. So from 1100 block north on all these streets, the resurfacing is part of this?
It will be part of the restoration, and that restoration will be putting new asphalt down. Yes, sir.
Okay. And I don't know, the list for the future, but like say the up to the 1100 block of those streets, if they need resurfaced, that would be okay to do?
We would coordinate that with this project. So if they're going to be doing the restoration, we may add the rest of that street in. Like Lexington was done a few years ago. It doesn't need done. So Clifton, I believe, was done. So we'll look at that and we will coordinate that restoration. If that rest of that portion of the street needs done, we'll do it at the same time. And,
Okay.
and I failed to mention, there isn't a lot of lead services in this district, but we will replace 16 lead services in this project.
Okay. Okay. And again, the streets are, I know,
It's
Juniper
basically
or
big-
Riverside. all
Yeah,
the way-
basically Big Falls all the way over to Magnolia or Riverside.
Big Falls. Okay.
Yes,
Starting at
yep.
Big Falls. Okay. So Sawyer and Pitkin have nothing to do with this.
No, sir. They go to rack 33.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilman. I appreciate that. Let's see, any other questions or comments, committee members or non-committee members? All right, with that moving forward, I know, Chris, you said consent agenda is okay?
Yes.
All right,
Motion for consent.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. We'll put that on the consent agenda. Moving on to our next piece, number 11, ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into a sponsorship agreement with the Claremont Soil and Water Conservation District for the Lower East Fork Stream Restoration and Stabilization Project and declaring emergency. Chris Little.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of committee. Most of you have seen these before, or we sponsor a project through the Ohio EPA. And by doing this, they use part of the interest that we pay from one of our projects. So this is going to be the sanitary sewer small diameter project you're going to see here in a few minutes in a future piece of legislation. And by sponsoring this project, we will receive 0.1% reduction in our interest. So we have calculated that savings over our project for about $334,000 over the life of that bond or that loan. We try, and Jessica up in our watershed or up in our, that's our manager, she always looks at a project she can do, but they're nothing really fit this bill. So this is about reconstructing about 3 acres of wetland in this Claremont Creek. It's down by Cincinnati. It's for nutrient reduction. That's farmland. So they're going to create this 3-acre wetland to help reduce those nutrients from going into this lake, which obviously cause the harmful algal blooms. So consent is fine. I will take any questions, sir.
Thank you, Chris. Let me see if there's any committee members first. I do not see any. Any other council members online? Okay, I do not see. So committee.
Motion for consent.
Thank you.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. We'll put that on the consent agenda. Moving on to number 12. Ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into a contract after publicly advertising for bids for the construction of lower north side interceptor lining project and declaring an emergency. Chris Little.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of committee. Where the tunnel will discharge is our lower north side interceptor. So it's basically where it starts is the end of Peck Road or all the way around the corner, almost to the high level bridge. There's a 36-inch sewer that parallels the river down there. And then it churns it where Peck Road basically ends by the river. And then it flows all the way down paralleling Peck Road. And then it kind of shoots to the north. It shoots under Cauga Street. And then it goes and ties into our main interceptor, main outfall sewer, which is over by the Ohio Edison power station over there. So this is about 6,800 feet of sewer between 36 and 48 inch, and we will line it to rehabilitate it. Mr. Aiken is on here with me. He could tell you 25 years ago, they cleaned that sewer and they spent almost a whole summer out there cleaning it. It was a mess. So we have cleaned it numerous times since, but this lining will help extend the life of this sewer. We're hoping another 40 to 50 years without replacing it. So with that, I will take any questions.
All right, thank you, Chris. Any questions or comments from committee members? I do not see any. Any other council members? Okay, what was your pleasure, Chris? I missed that.
Consent is fine.
Okay.
Motion for consent.
Second.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Anybody else or anybody opposed? All right, thank you. We'll put that on the consent agenda. All right, our next piece, number 13, ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to apply for the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund, other known as the WPCLF bond, sign all documents for and enter into the WPCLF agreements with the Ohio EPA and OWDA for the construction of the lower north side lining project and declare an emergency. Chris?
So this is our application for the piece of legislation we just talked about, the lining project. So we're looking for a 45-year loan. Unfortunately, some of you may remember a year ago or a little bit, when interest rates we got some as good as or under 1%. Now they're kind of gone up. There's right now, July is about 2.6. We're looking to make an application. This won't be awarded for a couple months. Still 45 years is 2.6 isn't bad, but we really enjoyed those really good rates at 0.1. So that's what this is for the previous piece of legislation of lining. So with that, consent is fine. I will take any questions, sir.
All right, thank you, Chris. Committee members, any questions or comments? I do not see any. Any other council members online with us? I do not see anything. Committee members?
Motion for consent.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. Moving on to number 14. Ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into a contract or contracts after publicly advertising for bids for the construction of sanitary sewer reconstruction 2021 small diameter lining and declare an emergency. Chris Lettle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of committee. This is our annual program, our small diameter lining. There is a couple sections in here that go up to 36 inch because we have put a couple sections of sewer in our Lock 3 program that we're going to start later this year. But predominantly, sir, this is 8 and 12 inch segments of pipe. As you know, in our CMOM program, we have to TV and clean every segment of sanitary and combination sewer every 5 years. And once we do that, we do an assessment of those sections. Well, when we do that, we have to give it, whether it's a critical defect, whether it's a crack or a hole. So we do have to do a repair on that. So part of this project will be some spot repairs, but for the most part, it's going to be lining these sewers where we go in and put an internal liner in the sewer. It's about just under 100 streets all over the city. Most of these segments between manholes are about 300 feet. So, it could be High Street, it could be Broadway. They're basically all over the city that we'll be bidding this out, and a lining company will be coming in and lining these sewers. So with that, I will take any questions. Consent is fine, sir.
All right, thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Any committee members first? Any questions or comments? I do not see any. Any other council members? All right, I do not see anything. Committee?
Motion for consent.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. Moving on to number 15. Ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to apply for a water pollution control loan fund, other known as WPCLF. Bond, sign all documents for and enter into the WPCLF agreements with Ohio EPA and OWDA for the construction of the sanitary sewer reconstruction 2021 small diameter lining project and declare an emergency. Chris Little.
So this is the bond legislation on the project I just explained, sir. So basically, it's the same interest rate as I said before on the previous piece. With that, I will take any questions, and consent is fine.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Any questions from committee members? Questions or comments? I do not see any. Any other council members? All right, moving forward, committee.
Motion for consent.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. Moving on to our final piece, number 16, ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service or his designee after publicly advertising for bids to provide services to scan water service cards to import into on-base and GIS and declare an emergency. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of committee. In our water department, these water service cards, as we call them, they started going electronic, I think, in the middle 80s, like 83 or 84. But previous to that, going back to the turn of the century, the late 1800s or 1900s, they're all on cards. So if they came to your house and they did a repair, if it was a lead service, or if it was a galvanized service, or it's a new water main on your street, it was handwritten on that card. And all the markings where your water shut off on your lawn strip are on those cards. So it would say something like water shut off from left side property 14 feet, right side property 60 feet. Okay. So that's how they did it. Well, we'd like to digitize all these cards and get them into our GIS. So not only the engineers that are working in the office, but our staff from water, when they're out there in the field and they have a tablet now, they could pull it up without calling any of them, say, hey, can you look at the card? Because I don't have it. So that's what this is for, is to digitize all our records of those old paper cards and to make our operation obviously more efficient and try to get it more up to date. So with that, consent is fine, and I will take any questions.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Any questions from committee members? Any other council members? Chris, I do have a question. I'm just going to throw this out here. So when we do go to this, are we going to save like any of the paper trail data?
I don't believe, well, I don't believe we will. We will get rid of all of it. We'll back it up, you know, on another server, but we will get rid of the old paper. I mean, these cards are some are so unlegible. We moved them from Johnson Street, and it's kind of amazing how good these records are, but no, we will not save them, sir.
All right, thank you. I apologize. You said consent agenda?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. Can I get a
Motion for consent.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. So that concludes public service. Thank you, everyone. So we are adjourned.
Our next committee of the day is the Public Safety Committee. Those committee members are Kamer, Mosley, Lombardo, Malik, and McKittrick. We do have all members are present except for Councilwoman Mosley. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, I'd like to move forward and call the public safety meeting to order, please. All members are present except for Councilwoman Mosley. Can I get approval of our last meeting minutes, please?
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. Moving into the legislation, we do have three new pieces in front of us today. Our first piece is an ordinance authorizing the city of Akron or its designee to apply, accept, or expend funding from the FY 2022 OCJS Law Enforcement Recruitment Program from the Ohio Department of Public Safety for hiring, research, and declare an emergency. And I do believe we have Captain McCosey on with us. Captain, please.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, members of the committee. This piece is for us to apply for, accept, and expend OCJS law enforcement grant funds from the Law Enforcement Recruitment Program. There were several different categories into which we could have applied for a grant. We did apply for all three. And two of those we've gotten the idea that we are going to be awarded. These are not back in yet, so we don't know exactly how much, although the numbers that we have here reflect what the initial indication was. These grants, this particular project, to look at our hiring process. They will be working very closely with the HR department to look for ways to improve our hiring process and the success of our, especially of women and minority candidates within our hiring process. On this one, we're satisfied with the consent agenda. That's it. Questions?
Thank you, Captain. I appreciate that. Sarah, do you have your hand up or?
I
Yes.
do. I just got word that there was some changes to the wording in that title clause. Is it okay if I read in that?
Oh,
we
sure.
can do a substitute. Thank you
Yes.
so much. Okay, it should be ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to apply, accept, and expend funding from the FY 2022 OCJS Law Enforcement Recruitment Program from the Ohio Department of Public Safety for hiring research and declaring an emergency. And just so you know, Mr. Chair, I'll have a similar one for item number 18 as well.
Okay, thank you. And I guess it's the mayor replacing City of Akron, right? Okay.
Thank you.
So Captain McCosey gave us an explanation. Let me see if there's any questions from committee members first, questions or comments. I do not see any other council members that are online with us. All right, thank you. And Captain McCosey did say he's okay with consent agenda. Can I get a motion for that?
So
So
moved.
moved.
Motion.
Second.
Thank you. Have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. Number 18, and Sarah, I'll go ahead and refer back to you so you can read it in.
Thank you so much. This is an ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to apply, accept, and expend funding from the FY 2022 OCJS Law Enforcement Recruitment Program from the Ohio Department of Public Safety for a test preparation program and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Sarah. Captain, I'll go ahead and bring it back to you in case you have any additional comments or explanation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the same overall grant program, the law enforcement recruitment program. This is one of the other categories. We were notified unofficially that we did receive an award under this. This is going to allow us to do an outreach program and do some test prep programs, specifically working with the North Akron CDC. And then we're also going to take that program citywide. I believe we've already started doing these things, put the test prep programs out there in the community centers in a couple of different spaces, and we're going to be continuing to do that. This will help fund that program.
Okay, thank you, Captain. I appreciate you. Any questions or comments from committee members of public safety? No.
consent is
Any
fine.
other? Oh, okay, sorry, thank you. Any questions or comments, public safety committee members? No. Any other council members that are aligned with us? I don't see any. All right, wishes are consent agenda. I'll make the motion for consent. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, thank you, Captain. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right, our final piece in front of us today is brought in by Councilman Russ Neal. It's a resolution urging the Fraternal Order of Police Union Lodge Number 7, the union, the City Council and the City of Akron to engage in ongoing discussions regarding racial equity as it relates to police practices and use of force incidents within the City of Akron and declare an emergency. And I don't see him yet. Let me see. Yep, Councilman Neal. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This resolution should be familiar to most of us here on council. 2 years ago, not just this resolution, but a couple others came in dealing with us, asking us to address establishing equitable practices when dealing with our police force. When this was brought in 2 years ago, during the midst of the George Floyd situation, in the midst of the resolutions dealing with the police department, I remember our president of our police union stating that that's Minneapolis. This is Akron. We don't have those problems. You know, I sometimes wonder if we would have fulfilled our responsibility as a council 2 years ago, and took a real look at the equitable practices and policies within our police department, if Jalen Walker would still be alive. You know, when I spoke to his uncle reminded me of a situation that happened when he and I were in high school, when a young man named John Woods was shot and killed by police at the corner of Rose Avenue and Market Street. And basically his uncle Rodre said, you know what? Akron still hasn't learned. His uncle's a lifetime military guy. He understands best practices and how you review those practices. And when I asked him, you know, in the midst of our conversation, he said he doesn't want his nephew's death to be in vain. He wants institutional change in Akron so that no other family has to experience what his family is experiencing. And again, council, we can go back and look at the tapes. This came before us. We had an opportunity to address this 2 years ago. We didn't address it then. I'm hoping that we address it now. And not just because the lights are shining on Akron, but because hopefully now, because of unfortunately loss of a life here, we know that it's the right thing to do. Mr. Chair, I don't know if members of council had the chance to read the whole resolution, but if you or Madam Clerk, if neither one of you want to read it, I'd like to read it so that those who are viewing, because I don't think they have may not have the opportunity to put on the policy, can understand the resolution that's before us today, right now.
Well, I know I read the title clause of it. So, I mean, what I would like to do is see if we have any questions or comments. I mean, I don't want you to read the whole resolution for time. Is that what you're asking, to read the whole resolution?
I was, sir, because of, you know, we passed many resolutions. This one, like was stated when we passed the National Day of Racial Healing, this isn't one we just pass and put on the shelf. This is one that's going to take work and commitment on behalf of not only this council, not only the administration, the police union and the police department, but the community. Long after the media is gone and the attention is taken away from Jalen Walker's case, much like George Floyd nationally, our city is still going to have to heal from this, just like his family is going to have to heal from it.
All right. Well, go ahead and read it. I have it in front of me and all the whereas clauses. Go ahead, Councilman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Resolution urging the Fraternal Order of Police Union number 7, the union, the city council, and the city of Akron to engage in ongoing discussions regarding racial equity as it relates to police practices and the use of force incidences within the city of Akron and declaring emergency. Whereas the brutal killing of George Floyd in May of 2020 highlighted the ongoing harm inflicted by the continuation of structural racism in the area of policing. And whereas the city of Akron itself has been recently struck by the tragic death of its own Jalen Walker, whose death is currently under investigation by the Ohio Bureau of Investigation. And whereas in order to achieve equitable outcomes for persons of color, it's imperative that racial bias in policing be deeply examined in order to address existing racial inequities. And whereas notwithstanding the excellent service of many police officers nationwide, and I'm going to add here in our city, there remains a continued need to address structural racism that exists as a product of long-standing social and political systems. And whereas in order to achieve transparent and just policing, it is necessary to consider and evaluate racial equity tools to change policies, procedures, and practices that have perpetuated racial inequity in policing. And whereas the community, civic organizations devoted to racial equity, law enforcement, the union, and local government must work in partnership to achieve lasting structural change. And whereas this council believes that structural racism must be addressed through open, continuous, and respectful dialogue. Whereas this council believes that as a starting point, it is necessary to engage in ongoing discussions with the union, the city, and the community regarding racial equity and use of force incidences in an effort to ensure that the city is implementing policies and procedures that advance racial equity and just policing, excuse me, and do not unjustly shield or defend a police officer who has committed misconduct or improper use of force. Therefore, be resolved by this, by the council of the city of Akron. Council hereby urges that the engagement of the union, the city of Akron, the Akron City Council, excuse me, the city of Akron administration fostering ongoing discussions regarding racial equity as it relates to policing within the city of Akron, that this resolution is hereby declared an emergency, and we know the rest. I would, Mr. Chairman, out of respect for this resolution was shared with members of the Walker family. It was shared with members of the community who have been engaged in protests. But as so many times, people in our community say that we pass things by emergency. As urgent and as urgent as I believe, and I believe most of us believe that this is, I would ask that the community have a chance to speak on it. Because it's going to take all of us engaged. This is something I'm dedicating the rest of my time. One of the issues to make sure that as a city, we get it right this time. We had a chance to get it right 2 years ago. I want to make sure we get it right this time.
All right, thank you, Councilman. I do have a few comments, but I'll see if there's any other committee members first that have any comments or questions. I do not see any. Any other any other council members that are online with us? Okay. Obviously, you know, when you brought this in before, I had reservations about telling or urging the union on what they should do in practice, because I like to leave that up to our labor relations department. So those are one of my concerns, but yeah, I think if there's no questions or comments, we can maybe move forward to take time on it and continue discussing it, hear from the public. Russ, would you, when you go through this, would you consider, I was taking some notes today and everything when I was reading this, urging the mayor and the HR department and labor relations instead of having the FOP in there? Because with the FOP, I just think that's what's something that the mayor and his administration and labor relations should be involved in.
I hear your concern, Mr. Chairman, but the reality of it is, and the beautiful thing is that our meetings are taped. We can go back and hear the comments of our own leader of the FOP here. In most cities, the discussion is between the administration and the FOP. And we see what the product that we're getting. Matter of fact, I remember, because I was looking at my old notes, the police chief in Minneapolis talked about one of his challenges was in working with the FOP. And this is something we have to be careful of at being in the legislative body. A lot of times, those of us that are in institutions are either consciously or subconsciously, the work we do inevitably is about preserving the institution and protecting those who are in the institution, working on the best interests of the institution. Here we need members of the FOP to understand we're not trying to work against them, we want to work with them. We need them to be a part of the community. Just as we've spoken about evaluating our own practices and seeing how the policies that we pass impact the community, we need the union to look at the practices of our police department and how they impact the community. And unfortunately, it took this situation for all us to realize that, yes, we do need to do that. So I do not want to take out the FOP. If you remember, there was another, if you allow me to, sir, there was another one that came in dealing with equity that talked about the administration, the legislative branch, all of our union presidents, and the court system, so we could come up with equitable things. I don't know if you've been following what's going on in our court system because of policies now that are drastically impacting a certain segment of our community where they can't even get legal representation. And some of them are forced to represent themselves. Again, as a legislative body, we have an opportunity to help guide those discussions to create better policy. But where we sit right now, I'd like for the resolution to be worded as is, sir, because there's other opportunities in resolutions that will be coming behind this to include those other entities as you've spoken of.
Okay, well, thanks. I do see now we have some questions, some hands raised. So now we have a conversation going. I'll start with Councilman Malik because I saw his hand first, and then I'll go to Councilman McKittrick. Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Neal, for your comments and for bringing this in. I think I have two comments. I think the first is that, I don't have a concern with us speaking by a resolution with regard to, urging, any other group or a union as to, what we feel is appropriate. I don't think, we are permitted to act by ordinance and resolution. I don't think that that's inappropriate to share our positions as council through that. The substance of this, I agree with. I would, though, just state that I do struggle, Mr. Neal, with the purpose of this, just because I think it's abundantly clear, and I think I said this in December of 2020, that the FOP is not on the same page on these issues, right? I believe the day that the body camera footage was released in this most latest killing, that there was a press release the same day that nothing had been done wrong and that everything was totally according to policy. I know that when there was the incident with the snow being shoved in the resident's face, that again, the same thing, that everything was fine and everything had been done according to policy. And that is a frequent refrain. And so, I struggle with the point of passing a resolution where we know that we can't order anyone to come to a table. And we know that there's not the interest in coming to the table on this. And so it does feel like we would pass it and put it on a shelf because we cannot force anyone to come to the table. And so it may be more appropriate to just say that than to keep inviting people to a table that we know they do not want to come to.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman McKittrick.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Very similar to what Councilman Malik's talking about as far as bringing people back to the table and discussing policies. It's my concern. We just ratified some contracts here recently, and I being familiar with negotiations and contracts, I think in this situation, we would have to discuss reopening the contracts, and not doing so could possibly create an unfair labor practice against the city. And that's one of my concerns as far as liability of that, creating that type of liability. So it's very similar to what Councilman Malik was speaking of. So that's just my concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. We do have Councilwoman Howland. Her hand is raised, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate all the comments, and I find the resolution to be compelling in its content and well-intended. The time is well past for all members of this community to have the hard conversations, well overdue. That said, I want to respond to the comments and concerns about whether or not this would be overstepping. I think that if it's the case that we're overstepping when we encourage a union or any other entity to take a look at a hard topic, well, then we do it all the time. I would also submit that if there is a real sincere concern about this being a ULP, that the right thing to do would be to ask for some guidance from the law department, as it's not my impression that we actually served as ratification of the contract so as to step into an unfair labor practice condition. I think we need some clarification on that. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilwoman. Anyone else have any questions or comments? And then I'll ask for a vote for time. Councilman Neal, is that what you would want?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. Just so, because I know some of our members of council aren't here, and I know there may be some members from the community that would like to speak, but to address the concerns in engaging the union, again, I appreciate all the comments, but everything starts with establishing true, honest, open communication, establishing a relationship. And so I'm hoping that, the concerns that were expressed, that folks understand that this resolution doesn't encroach on the union contract at all. If the law department says that union contracts need to be reopened, well, then you know what? Then if it's to prevent something like this from happening again and to improve the policing practices, I mean, we're talking about, this is speaking to the death of Jalen Walker, but we've all seen what has happened, how our police has engaged the community since that shooting. And I can tell you, many in the community are saying, my God, if that's what's happening when they know that the lights and the cameras are shining on them, what's happening to people out in the street when the cameras aren't shining on them? We have problems. And I think in the framework of the collective work and collective discussion, the deliberative dialogue that takes place in the community, if the union hasn't been a part of those, I know those in the community that have been a part of those discussions, and many of them deal with tough issues, it's not an us against them mentality. It's one, understanding that we need to function as a healthy community. And in healthy relationships, you have those tough discussions for the betterment of that relationship, for the betterment of our community. So yes, Mr. Chairman, willing to take 1 week's time. So just in case anyone that, one of our council members, I know Ms. Mosley Samples is traveling. And in case one of the community members want to say something, but we'll be looking for passage next week and would be willing to step in right away with talking to our law department, looking at the best practice groups that we work with, like Greater Alliance for Race Equity, the Race Equity and Leadership Council. And there are some other groups that can help us form the framework for these discussions.
All right, thank you, Councilman. And I would ask you to consider what I spoke about at the beginning, in urging the mayor, human resource department, and labor relations to engage in these ongoing discussions instead of us being involved with the FOP. So that's it. So I ask for.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. Like I said, that resolution that dealt with all those unions as well as the municipal court system will be coming back before us. Because as I stated, if you've been following what's been happening, like just in our municipal court system, and there's some of the questions have been brought up about within our city, the hiring and promotion practices. I do believe we need to have those discussions, but that will be a separate resolution. Not to cloud the issue. I think this one needs to focus on the city, legislative, administrative, and our police and the community working together to resolve these issues.
Right. Okay. And then, like I said, the reasoning for mayor, human resource department, labor relations is, it's what are they doing? I mean, I'm not saying they're not doing anything, but I would encourage the mayor to continue these discussions, engage in these discussions with his relations department and the HR department. Like I said, I'll cut it at that.
Yeah, understood, sir. But in general, I mean, all those make up a part of the city. And I'm sure the administration will bring those in as to where they play in their role as far as this resolution. As we go further into looking into this, the other one specifically names out those because of the area of concern. But again, that was a resolution that was brought back in December of 2020 that before this, we go on recess or right after recess, will be brought back again. Thank you.
Right. All right. Thank you. Committee, is there a recommendation for time?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor for time? Aye.
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 And anybody opposed? And I'll ask Sarah, if you don't mind, do a roll call on this resolution, please.
Sure. Kamer,
Aye for time.
Lombardo,
Aye.
Malik,
Aye.
McKittrick.
Aye.
The motion for time passes 4-0.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everyone, for being with the Public Safety Committee. We are adjourned.
Our final committee meeting of the day is the Budget and Finance Committee meeting. Those committee members are Freeman, Amobian, Malik, Baylor, and Lombardo. Looks like we do have all committee members present whenever you're ready, Mr. Chair.
Very good. We will call the Budget and Finance Committee meeting to order. For the record, all members are present. And if I could please have a motion to accept the minutes from our previous meeting.
So move.
Second.
All right. Motion to second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you. We have one item today, and this is an ordinance authorizing an agreement between the Akron Fire Local 330 Bargaining Unit and the City of Akron regarding employee wage increases and benefit changes through calendar year 2024 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is our agreement with the International Association of Firefighters, Local 330. This is the third labor agreement that we've reached this year. So we have agreements with the ASME unit, FOP, and now fire. We do not have an agreement yet with CSPA. So this is the third of the four unions. This one is structured very similar to the FOP agreement, where there are wage increases in 2022, 2023, and 2024 of 4%, 4%, and 3%. There are also, similar to the other bargaining units and non-bargaining employees, there are increases in the healthcare premium contributions. Those will go up to $65 per month and $160. That's for single, and $160 for family next year, and they go to $70, $180 in 2024. Also similar to the FOP agreement, there will be bonuses of $3,000 this year and $2,000 next year. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
Okay, very good. I'd like to start with any committee members. If there'd be any questions, you please indicate by raising your hand on your screen. I'll start with Mr. Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Fricker, you mentioned bonuses. I don't see that reflected here. And then that was going to be my broader question before you mentioned that. Are there other changes beyond what's reflected in section 2 and section 3 that are part of this agreement?
So I think as part of the UCR, there was a summary of the agreements. I think it was in one of the back pages. That was all listed on the back, yes.
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay, this may be for our council clerk's office, but the version that I'm looking at does not have the UCR attached to it. And I believe that's what's online.
I will check into that. Thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Fricker, is there any like kind of financial estimate that can be provided on how the changes in the employee contributions and the bonuses will change the estimated expenditures for fire in the coming years? Obviously, the wage increases is pretty straightforward.
Right. So I have, based on my calculations, and this is for the entire city, so I don't have I suppose I could come up with a percentage breakdown, but for the entire city, over the life of the contract would be about $2.9 million in offsetting savings to the wage increases from the premium contribution increases.
Okay, what's the total value of those wage increases?
So for the fire contract, it's about $6.7 million over the 3-year contract.
Okay. And what's the value of those bonuses?
So the bonuses, the value of those would be approximately, let me find my spreadsheet here. So it'd be about almost $1.3 million.
Okay.
That's for this year. I'm sorry, that's just for 2022.
Okay.
And so it'll be roughly 2/3 of that next year.
And that's, sorry, one moment, I'm just taking notes. And that is being paid for using general fund or ARPA or what?
That will be premium contribution. It will be paid through the funds that fund the, so both the general fund and the EMS fund, but will be supplemented with, because ARPA funds will be a part of the revenues into those, into the general fund at least. So yes, in theory, these will be partially funded by ARPA.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Amobian, please.
I think my questions have been answered. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Let me see. Ms. Holland?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Fricker, you mentioned that this is like another piece of legislation that we recently voted on. And I have sort of an overall question about these kinds of pieces of legislation, this one in particular. Is the effect of this legislation for City Council to ratify the contract or is it simply to provide approval for expenditures relating to the wage and benefit increases within the
I
contract?
believe it's the latter. It's not to ratify the contract itself. It is, at least that's my understanding from speaking with the deputy mayors for labor relations, but it is because we have passed wage ordinances and these, these bargaining agreements provide for those wage cost of living increases, and therefore that is what we are presenting to council.
Right, we're simply approving the expenditure, right?
Correct.
And not that I expect this to be your subject matter area, but council doesn't negotiate or ratify labor agreements.
That is my understanding, correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and just to follow up on what Ms. Holland said, it's always been my understanding that we're talking about expenditure here. We're not about.
Correct.
About approving
These
a
are
contract.
we have legislation for the various wage policies that we put in place, and that is what is reflected here.
Okay. Let me see if there's any, before I come to you, Mr. Malik, let me see if there's anybody else. All right. Okay, Mr. Malik, come back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to continue on with the wonderful discussion that's going on. I just want to be clear. Section 1 of this agreement authorizes the mayor, his designee, to enter into an agreement, amending the current agreement and extending it. So it would be helpful if we as council could get clarity from the law department. Is council required to approve bargaining agreements separate from the specific, expenditure or funding language or provisions? And I'm happy to ask that via email if it would be preferred, but I think I would like some clarity on that.
Very well.
Okay.
I think we could have the law department weigh in on that between now and tonight's meeting, if that would be acceptable to everyone on council.
Yes, and that would be fine with me. I don't have any concerns with the substantive provisions here. This is the second time in, a few months that this question is coming up, and I think it would be helpful to get some clarity. So I'll submit a written email as well to the law director.
Okay.
Right. Ms. Mobian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question. Mr. Fricker, the unions that we approved earlier, not the FOP or the firefighters, the other one, the ASME, I think.
ASME, correct, yes.
The terms were different. What were the terms?
So their terms where they had stipends of two $1,000 payments and a wage increase of, now they just did a 1-year agreement. So they did not do a 3-year agreement like we did with FOP and fire. So they did 1 year at 3.25%, and that's what we also applied to non-bargaining employees.
Right. So that will change next year?
We will have to do another agreement with them for 2023, correct? Yeah, and 24 for that matter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did we do bonuses for them, or we're doing that?
We did bonuses of two $1,000 payments with them, correct? With AFSCME, yeah.
So let me ask you this. In my mind, these are the least paid employees for the most part. Am I correct?
I mean, it still varies
lowest.
somewhat based. I mean, it still varies somewhat by by your job classification. So, there is some variation within all the units. So there are some employees within AFSCME that make more than some non-bargaining employees. And, so it's kind of a hard question to answer. I would say, if you looked at average, that's probably a true statement, but again, it does still vary somewhat by which job classification you're in.
Yeah. So once we approve their contract, we don't do a reopener, even for the 1 year. Because usually,
I mean, unless that has been previously agreed to, there isn't anything in there about, about a reopener. So with ASME, it's a 1-year agreement. And therefore we will, we will negotiate with that bargaining unit again for the 2023 and possibly 2024 agreement. Or it might be, we do a 3-year agreement next year for 23, 24, and 25. So I think that that is yet to be determined, but the bottom line is that we have a 1-year agreement with them.
right, yeah. And my only concern is that you're talking about higher bonuses, and you're talking about higher wage increases and everything for the other 2 major unions that we've talked about. And in my mind, even if we talk about the average, those folks that are included in the other union, the ASME, are usually folks that are making, like you said, it's a wide range, but I think the majority of them are probably making much less than the firefighters and the police officers. And it's interesting that they weren't, I don't know.
Well,
Sadly,
I will
sadly
say
enough,
this.
that's
I will say
okay.
this. To some extent, that was dictated based on the qualifications for receiving premium pay, which the guidance with the ARPA funding is, where our safety forces would qualify for those, whereas, many of the other employees, including many of those in ASME, would not qualify for that. So we are doing some form of premium pay using the revenue replacement dollars, but the non-safety forces don't qualify directly. So it made it easier to fund the stipends that are in these bargaining agreements with ARPA dollars. If that makes sense.
But if you brought something to council asking us to include them in that premium package at a higher rate, we could consider that.
But it's all dependent on the guidance and whether they qualify directly or not.
And this is guidance from Guidehouse or guidance from
Well, it's guidance from the federal government.
But it's
how the
Guidehouse
ARPA legislation is written on who qualifies directly for premium pay.
But it's my understanding that Guidehouse is the one that's reading the legislation and informing us as to what we can safely do.
I mean, they are, but that, I guess I'll just say that that language is pretty clear. And, so we have a good idea of which employees qualify directly and which ones we would have to use revenue replacement for.
I'm just a little disturbed by this, but anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lombardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just would like to make a motion for a favorable report and suspend the rules.
Okay, any further discussion? So we have a motion to suspend the rules for favorable report. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right, we'll pass that out this evening. And
Mr. Chair, could I do a roll call on that? I'm not sure I heard everyone.
Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you. Freeman,
Aye.
Amobian,
Aye.
Malik,
Aye.
Baylor,
Aye.
Lombardo.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your questions. And we are adjourned at 3:19. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is the final committee meeting of the day. Council will meet at 7